Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. It is the NBA Finals. They are here. They start officially tonight with the Denver Nuggets playing host to Game 1, taking on the Miami Heat. Definitely not the most expected finals, Sap, though Denver was the 1 seed virtually the entire way in the Western Conference. So I guess you could say not a surprise by virtue of their seeding, but the opposite would be true of the Miami Heat, who were the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference and lost their first play-in game, had to win a game just to even get into the playoffs. And here they are in the NBA Finals. So two very different paths, but these are the two teams that we have. And for Denver, Sap, it is their first ever appearance in the NBA Finals. They are favored to win, so they're looking to make it 1-for-1. So, Sap, before we get into the intricacies of how each team can win, let's just let everybody know our picks for the finals and then go from there.
Well, you know me, I always pick 6 games because I'm chicken to pick
nice
5.
Number. Nice even
7.
number.
Yeah.
Sap.
6 is kind of down the middle, so I try not to be that guy, but sometimes you look at it and go, Miami's too tough to surrender in 5, and if it gets to Game 7, we've seen what the Miami Heat can do in a Game 7. They just did it earlier in this week at TD Garden where they blew out the Celtics when everyone in the basketball world expected the Celtics to win. So I'm going to go Denver in 6. I just look, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Miami wins this thing. Look at the path to get here. They had to beat the best team in basketball, the 58-win Milwaukee Bucks. Then they beat a real scrappy, well-coached Knicks team in round 2. And then they beat the second-best team in basketball, the 57-win Celtics. Now they would have to beat the 4th-best team in basketball, the Denver Nuggets. So that, to me, would be pretty much an incredible run by a team that was 44-38 this year, the Miami Heat, and actually had a negative point differential, which that's never happened of any team that's participated in the NBA Finals. I mean, I'm so old, I do remember that the Houston Rockets in 1981 made it to the NBA Finals at 40-42. They had a losing record. They made it and lost to the Celtics in 6 games. So I just think that Jokic is playing at such a high level that I don't know what exactly Miami's going to do to combat him. He's a difficult matchup because of his ability to pass. If you double him, it's almost like trying to put a blitz on a quarterback. He'll pick you apart. And if you play a zone defense against Jokic, it's like playing a zone defense against an elite quarterback. He's going to pick you apart either way. So Miami will be prepared. They'll give it all they have, but Denver's just too good right now.
I'm going to take Denver, and I know I want to pick 6, but I'm going to say 5. I know Miami is scrappy, but those 3 losses against the Celtics, I think, showed what their shortcomings are and showed that, and I think the fact that the series went 7 games for an older team like Miami is to their disadvantage. And I also think that playing in the altitude, especially these first 2 games in Denver, are going to be tricky for an older team again. So I think Denver has some advantages here. The one thing I would worry about if I was Denver, it isn't so much a matchup. It's that was the act of getting over that hurdle and finally getting to the finals and beating the Lakers to do that, Sap. Was that like a championship within itself? Was that such an emotional moment for the franchise that it's almost they have a potential letdown in the NBA Finals? That's my one concern about them, is that you could say, okay, mission accomplished. We got here for the first time in franchise history, and to do it, we beat our most hated rival, the Lakers. But I do think that ultimately the cohesion of the Nuggets and the fact that they have an impossible matchup in Jokic is going to win the day for them. But I do think that is a possibility. If Miami's going to win, it'll because Denver has some sort of a letdown from getting to the finals to actually playing in the finals.
There's a 10-day layoff between the end of the Western Conference Finals, which the Nuggets swept the Lakers, and the start of the NBA Finals. And yes, they had never beaten the Lakers in a playoff series. The franchise has never participated in NBA Finals. So when they won that, it was like, as you said, mission accomplished. Although their celebration wasn't all that extreme. I think that, they kind of expected to wrap that series up, especially after getting up 3-0.
But they were still talking about the Lakers, Sap, days after.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it is an accomplishment, right? I mean, the Lakers are to the Western Conference what the Celtics are to the Eastern Conference, even more so, because the Lakers' success over the last 20, 30, 40 years is even more extreme than the Celtics' success over that period of time. When you compare that the Lakers have won 11 championships since the merger, and the Celtics have won 4.
Yeah.
So obviously the Lakers have been the most successful franchise since the merger in the mid 70s, and that's when Denver came into the league. So yeah, there could be some sort of letdown there. Again, a long layoff. Maybe they're going to be a little bit flat coming out. Miami could take some of that cachet and that excitement and that momentum that they built by winning Game 7 in Boston. I know they flew directly from Boston to Denver, so it doesn't give them a long period of time to get used to the altitude. If they had wrapped that series up against the Celtics earlier, maybe they could have got out to Denver early to try to acclimate themselves in the high altitude. But yeah, I mean, look, going up against Miami is always tough. Like I said, they're not going to lay down. They may lose the first 2 games in Denver, and they'll just battle you because they've got a great coaching staff and they've got veteran players who were in the finals just 3 years ago. And you've got players like Kevin Love and Kyle Lowry, who sure are a shell of their former selves, but they are champions. And, that can mean something. But right now, Denver's the best team in basketball. They've proven that throughout pretty much the regular season. Let's not forget they kind of took their foot off the gas the last couple of weeks in the regular season. May have cost Nikola Jokic an MVP. Several wins that Denver could have added at the end of the season. They would have been right there with, Philadelphia, Boston, and Milwaukee. They're prepared right now, and they've kind of steamrolled through the playoffs so far, going 12-3.
Yeah, I mean, there's no team that's been close to as good as Denver's played in this postseason. Miami was looking that way until they stumbled, a little bit against the Celtics, and that they at times look like they're struggling against the Knicks. But that's the thing, like it's hard to pick Miami, even though they keep winning. It's still so hard to pick them because you look at the roster and you're like, how the hell are these guys here right now? Like you said, negative point differential, lowest scoring team in the regular season. Their second leading scorer has been out the entire postseason. He's Tyler Hero aiming to come back in Game 3. And so you're like looking up and down the roster. You're like, well, how is this team doing it? We heard a million times about the undrafted guys, but like at some point, Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, like they're not going to have great series. And I think all 3 of those guys had really great series against the Celtics. Denver, I think is not that type of team like the Celtics were that's going to just be lackadaisical and show up and say, all right, we have better roster than you. We had a better record than you. Lay down for us. I don't think Miami obviously won't do that. And I don't think Denver has that type of mentality. Like Jokic, this has sort of shifted the whole view on European players, not just him, but this newest generation of European players, whereas calling a player a Euro player always used to mean they were soft. Like these are tough dudes now. Like Jokic is as tough and physical and is tough mentally too. So I think that Denver has, you're going down, you're checking off boxes. They check off virtually everything. Maybe a slight advantage for Miami when you're talking about coaching, advantage in talking about experience, but everything else, you got to say Denver.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they'll have the best player on the court, Jimmy Butler, who in a given series, a 7-game series, will have 4 really good games, but then he'll put in a few stinkers. I don't recall Nikola Jokic having a stinker so far in the postseason. He's always doing something. I mean,
Sappy's averaging 30, 13, and 10 in the postseason.
Crazy. Those are LeBron James types numbers, right? That we've seen LeBron put forth in numerous playoff runs, right? And the thing about Jokic is, and I'm trying to bang my head to remember if this has ever been done before in the league, but this is the guy who's clearly a top 5 rebounder and a top 5 passer. And I think probably the last player that you could say that about was probably Larry Bird in his prime, because Bird would go out and get 10, 11 rebounds a game, 7, 8 assists a game. That was pretty much his average in his prime. Jokic is that and even a little bit more. And again, scoring is up from the 80s, so he gets more assists than Larry Bird did. He's not a greater passer than Larry Bird, but that's the last guy that could do that. Generally, when you lead the league in rebounding, you're not a great passer. If you lead the league in passing, you may be a great scorer, but you're not a great rebounder. So Jokic has a really unique skill set, and he does it so effortlessly, and not a lot of turnovers there. Great shooting percentage from 2 and 3, so efficient. And right now, I think he smells it that if he wins this, he will be crowned the best player in the world, because it's been kind of fluid. We both agree that Giannis has been for the last few years, but I think you'd have to give that title to Jokic if he wins this championship, because like Giannis, he would have 2 regular season MVPs, then follow that up with an NBA championship and most likely a finals MVP. And when you're comparing Jokic to Giannis, they're not at the same level as, say, LeBron or Jordan.
Sure.
Clearly not, because they do have some flaws in their game. We could talk about Jokic not being a great defender. Well, Giannis isn't a great shooter. So maybe that cancels off in terms of their flaws. But yeah, Jokic, I think, smells it right now. And they're very healthy. Miami is banged up a little bit. We know Butler's dealt with some sort of sprained ankle. Hero may not come back till game 3. And they obviously look gassed after their 7-game series against the Celtics. And again, Caleb Martin looked like Klay Thompson in that series against the Celtics. Is he going to
I
do that
think
again?
yeah, I think he should have won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. By the way, I don't
It was
think
close.
Butler should have won it. It should have been Martin. Martin was more consistent. Butler's highs were higher, but that's neither here nor there. Sap. I think the interesting thing for Jokic and the Nuggets is, this is history for both of them, right? For Denver, again, we said it, first time in the NBA Finals, they could bring a championship to the city of Denver in basketball for the first time ever, and the 2 of the other 4 teams in Denver have won. The Avalanche have won a couple of times, and the Broncos have won a couple of Super Bowls. So Denver would leave the Rockies, then I guess, being the last team in that area to not win, to get that monkey off their back there. And for Jokic, winning a championship suddenly vaults him into that, in my opinion, that Kevin Garnett, Charles Barkley, David Robinson sort of range of great players of all time.
Sure, Dirk Nowitzki, and I think Giannis is in there too. So
yeah,
now
and
you've got guys
Giannis is already there, in my opinion.
already there. Yeah, guys that we could talk about being 18 to 25 all-time greats. I think Kevin Durant's a little bit better than those guys because of his incredible offensive output and efficiency, and he did
And
win
multiple
2 titles.
Yeah, multiple.
Right. And I know people want to push back and say those were Golden State's titles. Well, I don't think Golden State's winning those titles without Kevin Durant. Those are probably LeBron's titles if Durant doesn't show up in Golden State. So I put Durant.
It's not like he was along
there.
for the ride, Sap. He
was. He was Finals MVP both times, right? And he hit the biggest shots in both of those series, right? Game 3 in Cleveland, down or close, hits a big 3 over LeBron in both of those big games. So yeah, I would put him maybe at the forefront of that. I've always ranked these players. I think it kind of goes all the way up to, say, Shaq around 15, 16. And then you've got about 10 guys that are really bunched together. Maybe it's Dr. J, Rick Barry, Dirk Nowitzki, Garnett, Barkley, Karl Malone. Yeah, you could have to put Jokic and obviously Giannis in with those players. And I'm probably leaving a few guys out, but that gives you an idea how great this guy is. When you win multiple MVPs and then follow it up with a world championship, that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, so that's on the line for him too, in terms of, listen, he's won 2 MVPs, his stats are outrageous, he's gonna go down as an all-time great player, but we know it's a championship driven league and a championship driven sport, in that if Jokic doesn't seal the deal and doesn't win here, he may never go back again, and he's going to be looked at a lot differently historically. It's just winning that 1 ring sort of cements you historically, and he still has plenty of years ahead of him, so he may well win more than 1. But to get that first one under your belt is really, really important when you're talking about where you rank historically. It certainly was for Kevin Garnett, and I think it's held Charles Barkley back. If you look at his raw numbers, he maybe should be higher on a lot of people's rankings, but he never won a championship, and he played on some damn good teams too. So very important for Jokic and for the Nuggets too. They're trying to make history, and I think it would be a disappointment, Sap, if they don't. We've said that about every team that's lost to Miami, that they've had a disappointing season. But for Denver, with the home court advantage, with the altitude advantage, with having the best player on the team, and they have just they're healthier too, Sap. That's something that we're not really talking about, is the Heat are banged up too. Besides Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry has an ankle, Caleb Martin rolled an ankle, Vincent rolled an ankle, Jimmy Butler, it seems like they all have ankle injuries. So, and Denver seems pretty darn healthy, Sap.
Yeah, they are. And then you can also make a case that Jamal Murray could have won the Western Conference Finals MVP. He was outstanding against the Lakers. He's playing a lot closer to the way he played in the bubble 3 years ago. So if Jokic doesn't have it in a given night, then Jamal Murray can step up. And the thing about Jokic is he may not score in a given night, but he's going to go get 15 rebounds and 12 assists on his way to contributing. And now you get Aaron Gordon. Michael Porter Jr. has been outstanding in this postseason. And then let's throw KCP in there. I mean, he's a champion as well. He was the 3rd best player on the Lakers in the bubble when they won the championship. So they've got a lot of other players that can contribute, but it's all about Jokic. This is his time. Kind of in a similar sense, the way Dirk was the guy in his first finals, which was in 2006, his 7th year in the league. And kind of ironically, that Dallas team lost to what was considered a less than great Miami team, although Dwayne Wade and Shaq certainly made them a contending team. And Dirk didn't come up big in that final, but then he did, 5 years later when they beat LeBron and the Heat as well.
Against a much better Heat team.
Exactly. And this is how it happens sometimes. You beat a team that is perceived better, and then you lose to a team that's not considered as good. It's just that's the way sports work. I mean, the Patriots beat the 0-1 Rams, but they couldn't beat the Giants twice in Super Bowls. I mean, it's just sometimes matchups will determine who's going to win or lose these series. But I like Denver in 6 games, and I just think home court advantage is going to come in, and I just think Jokic right now, I don't know how you defend him, right? Because like I said, if you double him, he'll pick you apart. If you single cover him, he's going to find a way to score 30 points. There's really no way to deal with that.
They just swept the guy who had the best chance of defending him, Sapp, and Anthony Davis.
Exactly,
He couldn't do it.
No, and the Lakers played okay in that series, and they got swept. I mean, LeBron and Anthony Davis were going to have to bring it even more, and they weren't able to, and D'Angelo Russell was god-awful. But, yeah, I mean, Denver took care of business against the Lakers. I just don't know how you deal with Jokic at this point. If there's one coach in the league that can maybe figure it out, it's Eric Spoelstra. But they don't even have that much size. They're a smallish team. When Adebayo's off the floor, you put Cody Zeller on Jokic. I mean, that's a mismatch of all mismatches, right? So, but Spoelstra is the guy who can throw a lot of things at you.
Absolutely. Would you say that this Miami team is the least talented team that Denver has played throughout this run? So they played Minnesota, who we agree, a lot of talent, just don't really have their heads screwed on straight. And then they played the Suns with, 2 phenomenal talents, and then the Lakers with 2 phenomenal talents. Is this Miami team on paper the easiest opponent that they'll have?
Yeah, in terms of top tier talent, sure. I mean, Bam Adebayo is Miami's second best player. I mean, in the finals against the Celtics, it was Caleb Martin, who may have been their best player, right along with Jimmy Butler. I didn't think Bam Adebayo had a really good series against the Celtics.
Not at all.
But he's perceived to be their second best player. I mean, yeah, Minnesota is a head scratching team because you've got Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, you've got
Anthony
Edwards. I mean, you've got a lot of talent on that team, but they can't get out of their own
Mike
way.
Conley. They even have, have a bunch of good players.
Really good, talented team. Phoenix, which was even with Denver at 2 games apiece, and then they just fell apart in games 5 and 6. Yeah, when you got Durant and Booker on the same team, you've got an opportunity. And like I said, the Lakers weren't god-awful against Denver. Those games were fairly close. And in some sense, it kind of reminded me of when the Celtics swept Brooklyn last year. It was a sweep, but it was a close sweep.
Right.
I know it sounds like something Yogi Berra would say, but there were some close games in there. The Lakers had leads in the second half of 3 of the 4 games. They just couldn't hold on. But yeah, you can make a case that this is the weakest team that Denver's going to face in terms of pure talent, but we know how well coached they are, how tough they are physically and mentally, that, they're going to put up more of a fight, most likely than any of the 3 teams in the Western Conference, just the way they're structured.
Yeah. So Sap, if we're just looking at the other way around, we're both picking Denver, but how can Miami win this series?
Butler's going to have to go off and play like he did, especially early against Milwaukee, where I believe it was in games 3 and 4 or whatever period it was. He combined for 98 points in 2 games. So he can go off and average nearly 50 points per game in a 2-game stretch. And these 3-point shooters are going to have to continue to hit in the high 40s. Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson. If Tyler Hero comes back and, is able to shoot 40-45% from 3, that's what they're going to have to do. Can they continue to do that? Not likely. The Celtics kind of helped them along the way by not defending at a high level in some of those games. I think Denver's going to be more focused on that, but you never know. I mean, obviously, if those guys continue to hit at that high rate, they'll be in that game. And then maybe Jokic cracks under pressure. He's the best player on the court. It's his time, and maybe he's just not ready for it.
Well, you've said it before about him, Sap. The only weakness you've analyzed this pretty correctly, and you've seen in his game, is he gets frustrated or irritated sometimes.
He does.
If any team is going to do that to somebody, it would be the Miami Heat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I think the Celtics would have been the favorite over Denver. First of all, they would have had home court advantage, and they have some guys, namely
Which
Grant
means
Williams,
nothing to them.
which, yeah,
So-
exactly. I mean, they'd be better off saying, you know what, we're going to play all the games in Denver. We'll just get used to that altitude and play better on the road. But Grant Williams was a guy, if Joe Mazzulla decided to play him at all in the finals against Nikola Jokic, who kind of irritates him. I'm assuming that Draymond Green was a guy who would irritate Nikola Jokic. Again, you're not going to stop a player of that caliber, but you can get in his head and maybe commits silly fouls and has to go to the bench and is frustrated. That's one way to go after him. And you're right.
Yeah, maybe
Miami,
Haslam gets in there, Seth.
yeah, he's old enough to be his dad at this point. But yeah, I'm sure Pat Riley is thinking up some things along with Eric Spoelstra. And I think, look, Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, but it's also good to have a person like Riley there as a consigliere that you can sound some things off of to get in the head of the opposing players. I mean, Riley had to learn to do that with the Lakers to break through and beat the Celtics twice in the finals. Let's not forget that after the 84 finals, the Lakers stood 0-8 against the Celtics in the finals, going all the way back to, before I was born. And finally, they broke through in 1985. And Riley, at that point, tried to create a much tougher team physically and mentally. And ever since then, whether he was with the Knicks or the Heat, that's exactly what he's tried to create. Like I said, they're not going to back down. But yeah, they're going to have to gum it up a little bit, make it ugly, get Jokic out of his game, and then maybe they have that chance. But I think Jokic is so zoned in right now that it just looks like it's his time.
Well, what if the Heat are able to do all those things, which is just a lot of things, ifs, ands, or buts? What does it do for Jimmy Butler's legacy if he wins a championship, Sap?
Oh, man. I mean, you beat Giannis in round one, who we both agree is the greatest player in the league. Then you get through the Knicks, a well-coached team that doesn't have a player of that caliber. Then you beat the Celtics, who everyone thinks has the best roster. You win Game 7 on the road. You take 3 of 4 TD guard, which, again, isn't a great accomplishment because we've seen the Celtics go, 9-12 in their last 21 home playoff games, which is just something I still can't believe.
I love it.
But
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I know. It's like head-scratching. This is someone who saw the Celtics win so many playoff games at home back in the 80s. I'm like, did Larry Bird even lose 12 home playoff games in his career? I'm sure he did, but, just think about how long it would take for him to get to loss number 12 would be a lot more than back-to-back years. And then if Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat are able to beat Nikola Jokic, who's on the precipice of becoming the best player in the world, oh, yeah, this would be an incredible accomplishment for Butler and the Miami Heat. It would be an incredible accomplishment if the Florida Panthers go out and win the Stanley Cup, because if they beat the Vegas Knights, they would have beaten the 1, 2, 4, and 5th best teams in hockey to win the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, the Heat and Panthers are trying to pull off something that's never been done, where the Stanley Cup champion and the NBA champion reside in the same city in the same year. It's never been done. And again, we talked about it last week. It's because Tom Brady now resides in Miami.
Yes,
that the
that's exactly
Juju
why.
is going to just, going to lead his way to those two teams winning championships. And, maybe the Marlins and Dolphins contend sooner rather than later.
But Sap, so before we move on, so if Butler wins, top 50 all-time player?
I have Paul Pierce at the end of that, I don't know, 48 to 52 in that range. I guess you could make a case. Yeah, I mean, if he carries a team, that's even more impressive than Pierce being Finals MVP, because he still had Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen on that team, and Jimmy Butler doesn't have anybody quite like that. Butler's a 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA player, been on first or second team All-Defense several times. I mean, he's on his 4th team, and you look at what he did in Miami. Yeah, he'd be right in that range, I would think. And then in 25 years, hopefully I'm still alive when they come out with the NBA's top 100 players. I know Jokic will be on there. Butler certainly would be too, especially if they win this championship in Miami. Yeah, I think you could make a case for that.
A lot of fascinating stuff, storylines for the NBA Finals, even though it's not the teams that people were expecting. But we're gonna keep track of everything and every game, so make sure you're checking us out. But there is news amongst teams that are not in the NBA Finals. We'll start off in Detroit, where the Pistons have found their new head coach, Monty Williams, who gets a massive contract, 6 years, $78.5 million. For Monty Williams. I think it's a perfect hire for that team. They need a mature voice. He is a very mature voice, and he can grow with the team. And there's not going to be crazy expectations on him like there was in Phoenix this year. So maybe an overpay, but hey, if you're willing to pay it for a coach, it doesn't go against your salary cap, Sap.
No, these teams can afford whatever they want for coaches. He's now the highest paid coach in NBA history. We both love Monty Williams. The question I'd have to ask, and if I was running the Detroit Pistons during the interview, and I don't think they went this far because apparently Monty Williams turned them down originally, and then they just threw so much money at him that
they had to
couldn't say
overpay
no.
to get somebody to coach that team in that city.
Exactly. That's what's going on with the Pistons. It's not like you're going to go there and win a championship right away, but if someone throws $13 million a year at you, you're going to listen. But one question I would have had for Monty Williams is what happened with DeAndre Ayton? Because you still have some young, talented players in Detroit. Like, how is he with young players?
And they're all centers too.
Right, he's got a bunch of guys too. Right, yeah. So
Wiseman is there on there.
Well, that's a whole other question. I mean, that may be one of the reasons Bob Myers left Golden State, because he had 3 high draft picks to add to Golden State, and he kind of struck out on all of those, right? With Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Jonathan Wiseman, who's now in Detroit. It seems like he was just drafted yesterday by the Golden State Warriors. But yeah, that would have been the first question I asked, is what went wrong with DeAndre Ayton? Now, whether it's DeAndre Ayton's fault that didn't work out, or Monty Williams' fault that it didn't work out, what was the lack of communication? That would have been one of the questions. But it was kind of surprising that Detroit was able to get him, because you just figured Monty Williams, maybe Toronto would have been a place he went. They're not necessarily ready to win. Well, that's not going to happen, because according to Brad Stevens in his year-end press conference, said that Joe Mazzulla is coming back. Although the way he answered the question was not exactly forthright. He was asked, to be clear, is Joe Mazzulla coming back? And he kind of mumbled, yeah, almost like Bill Belichick would. It wasn't like, oh, absolutely, he's coming back. So,
well, he's been hanging out with Bill Belichick at the game, Sap. So I don't know, maybe he's giving him some press,
and they could
press conference tips.
He's trying to pick Belichick's brain how to construct a winner, and the easy answer is get Tom Brady. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. But Mazzulla's going to come back now. He's going to have to round out his coaching staff, because 3 of those assistants are going to Houston with Ime Udoka. So the fun continues for the Celtics. They're going to have a really interesting offseason, not just creating those assistant coaches, but what they do, obviously, with Jaylen Brown and how they construct that roster.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Stevens answered a lot of questions today. A lot of the answers I didn't love as a Celtics fan. He was reveling about how well the team played with their backs against the wall, and then said, with the exception of Game 7, well, Game 7 kind of mattered a little bit against the Miami Heat. Could have sent you to the NBA Finals, and you played like absolute crap in your own building. He said turnovers were the biggest problem. That could be said. Yeah, sure, turnovers were a massive problem. I think the biggest problem is just their mentality. Sap and Felger and Maz were on the air today, kind of ripping into Stevens, saying that he doesn't have the right mentality and it's a top to bottom organizational thing. They may be right. I don't know. I think he's done a pretty damn good job and in his new position, and something he had no experience doing, and I was skeptical of him. I look at the roster. I think he built a really good roster, and I think if there's areas you're going to criticize him, it'd be giving Joe Mazzulla an extension, because we've talked about that at length. I think that was foolish, and maybe not having a sense of urgency at the trade deadline this year to address a backup to Tatum and Brown. But that's really it. As far as the initial hiring of Mazzulla, they had little choice, and we just don't know any details about the Udoka thing, Sap. That seemed like maybe that came more from ownership than anything to get rid of him. We just don't know, but ultimately, we'll find out a lot more about what the Celtics are about this offseason than any answers Brad Stevens was giving today in his press conference.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big decision on Jaylen Brown. What do you do with the rest of the roster? Do you shake it up at some point? Is Grant Williams gone because he's a restricted free agent? Peyton Pritchard obviously wants to move on to go to a place where he can play more than he's played here. And then what you do with that coaching staff, you have to bring in some veteran assistants that have coached in the NBA, whether it's Frank Vogel. I know people are talking about Steven Silas, but he didn't really accomplish anything in Houston. They've been the worst team in basketball.
Good enough. They won like 20 games in 2 years, Sap, under his tutelage.
Right. Yeah, let's hire him to be the consigliere to Joe Mazzulla. I think that Frank Vogel makes sense because I think he has a really good concept when it comes to defense. He got the Lakers to play defense when they won the championship. The only thing is he the coach in waiting if Missoula slips up
Right.
and Vogel's ready to take over, and what type of relationship would they have? But yeah, that the Celtics are going to be talked about a lot in the offseason because most everyone agrees best roster in the NBA, and they come up short once again. But back to Monty Williams, good for him. We're both big fans of his, but they're still several players away from contending. They're going to end up with the 5th pick in the draft, which is kind of no man's land since there's one, well, we expect to be all-time great player in
Right.
Big Vic, and then a couple of other players that can be really good. But the 5th pick is probably about as useful as the 8th or 9th picks with Detroit, which had an opportunity in that lottery, kind of got not screwed. They just ended up losing. Kind of like the Celtics back in 2007, right? We all expected them to get either the 1st or 2nd pick. Instead, they got the 5th pick, and it ended up being Jeff Green. But you were able to flip it for Ray Allen and trade for Kevin Garnett and win a championship. But everyone expected either Odin or Kevin Durant would come to Boston,
Right.
and that was not the case.
Yeah, no, Detroit, I mean, it's a long rebuilding project. They do have a potential star on the team in Cade Cunningham. He missed virtually all of last season with a shin injury, and they were tanking. They have Jaden Ivey, who I think is a tremendous young point guard, could also be a star. So they got some nice pieces, Sap.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why they overpaid for Monty Williams, because he's a good coach that has they're so young. They need that mentor voice. They can't have a young head coach to grow with this team. Maybe after Monty Williams moves on, if he does, but right now they need a mature adult in the room that's really full of, 21 and 22-year-old kids. That's pretty much the entire Pistons roster.
Yeah, they're so young, aren't they? I mean, they probably do have to bring in a veteran presence. Maybe they look to Draymond Green, who's from Michigan originally, played at Michigan State, from Flint, Michigan. I don't know if he wants to go home. I think he would probably want to go to a contending team at that point. Maybe it's the Lakers with his.
And I don't know what their intention is for like the next couple of years. Is it to try to win, or is it to try to, build a solid foundation and then, trade maybe one of your pieces for a veteran? I don't know.
And maybe Draymond isn't the right guy for that because, again, now he's
because he punched one of his teammates in the face.
Yeah, that doesn't go well, right? Doesn't look all that well. Plus, a lot of these guys that have been around for 10, 12 years, they're old school. They're looking at players that are 21, 22, and maybe they don't get it, and it doesn't work out for either side. So just kind of spitballing where Draymond is going to go, or he just stays with Golden State. But I think Bob Myers leaving Golden State, that may hurt the chances of Draymond staying in Golden State because he was so close to Bob Myers. So who knows what they're going to do. That's what's fascinating about the NBA the next month, 2 months. We're going to be talking about so many teams and how they're going to be constructed for next year.
Yeah, I was on the phone with my grandmother the other day, and she was saying, so when the championship is over, do you take a break from the podcast? I said, actually, we usually have more to talk about in the off season than the regular season. So,
exactly.
If you're listening to us this summer, you'll be chock full of episodes. Don't worry about it. There will be plenty to react to, and coaching moves and roster moves, free agency, trades. The NBA we're not doing this show just because we love basketball. It's genuinely exciting. I think that it's the most exciting league. They've empowered their players the most, which means that there's a lot of movement and drama, and that's sort of the package you get. But I'm looking forward to the finals. We're both disappointed that our respective teams aren't there and seemingly could have been this year. But I'm still going to be obviously always a basketball fan and entertained by the finals. So hopefully we get a good series. I'm rooting for Denver, Sap, because Miami has just been the arch enemy of the Celtics for a while. But I would love to see a 6 or 7 game series and it being really competitive.
Yeah, I think you could see that, obviously, because, again, I don't think Miami's a team that is going to back down. They could be down 3-1. They'll battle, maybe win game 5 on the road and then come back and lose in game 6. They're a tough team mentally and physically. They could get swept because Denver's that much better, but I say 6 games for the Denver Nuggets to win their first NBA championship.
All right, well, game 1 is tonight, Sap. Who you got in game 1?
I like Denver tonight. I think the rest is going to be a big factor. Miami trying to adapt to the high altitude and coming off the high of winning game 7 in Boston. I think Denver takes care of business tonight.
I think that it's going to be like the 0-1 Lakers and 76ers. The the Heat win game 1, and then it's a gentleman's sweep the rest of the way. That's my
Okay.
prediction, Sap. So
Yeah,
5 games, Nuggets.
It could be Miami just being so high after that win that they don't even know they're tired and they carried over, and Denver's a little
Denver
rusty.
hasn't
That can
played in
happen
a
too.
month, Sep.
It feels that way, yeah. I mean, they ended that series against the Lakers a week ago Monday. So, yeah, it's been a while. They're going to have to reintroduce themselves to each other.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check them out for all sorts of great content, including our show. And make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. We will be back doing lots of game recaps, analyzing the finals, analyzing any NBA rumors and things, transactions that happen. So make sure you stick to our social medias for all the reaction instantly to that news. And we're also going to be trying out some shows on Live Take Sports. You can just download the app. On our social medias, we'll give you all the information about how to do that and when we'll be on. So stay tuned for that. Lots of great stuff. If you like me and Sap, you're in for a treat. If you don't, it's going to be really miserable for you the next couple of months. But thanks for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you later. See ya.